Self-actualization is a constant unfolding process of who you are.
Scott, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. It's great to be here.
We're gonna have a great conversation, and I think a good place to start is to get a little bit more familiar with you and your interests in the mind. So I'm curious, how far back does that go, and how did that begin?
It goes back quite far. I remember as a really young kid being really interested in why people differed from each other, um, in talent and individual differences. Very, very, very young age, very fascinated with that, and wondering who are these kids in the gifted classroom? Who are these? Why am I in the special ed classroom? I had a learning disability, and they put me in special ed, and I actually repeated third grade, and uh, had difficulty listening and hearing things, and it made it, people thought I was stupid, quite frankly. When I was younger, people thought I was stupid, and um, so just at a very young age, it all perplexed me so much, and I think that really had its roots in in my really fascination with the human mind, and especially differences between people.
How long into your childhood was this a challenge for you? You mentioned being in a special needs class. You went on and obviously you've done a lot of things and you've had a lot of success. How long along your journey did you realize, this is something in my control and something I can overcome?
Uh, Took about till ninth grade, I'd say, high school. There was a special ed teacher who took me aside after class, who had it was the first time she had ever seen me, and she saw my frustration in the special ed classroom. She asked me what I was still doing there, and I told her that I had no good answer to that question, and started to really think to myself, what am I capable of? I think I'd been really secretly wanting someone to ask me that for a long time. Been wanting someone to ask me, what do you know, what maybe you're capable of more. And it really inspired me, and I took myself out of special ed and signed up for lots of classes that were more advanced, and realized I really had a love of learning, just deep love of learning, and deep love um, of uh, of just exploring everything I possibly could explore. And who knew? I mean, I didn't really know that I had such a love of that.
And where along your journey did your interest in Abraham Maslow begin?
Yeah, that was more recent. That was like a couple years ago. I was teaching a course at course at University of Pennsylvania on positive psychology, and was preparing my history lecture for the class, and was reading the works of Maslow, uh, and it just captivated me so much. I was like, wow, he put words to so much of what I have been interested in my whole career, and uh, I wrote this book on gifted intelligence redefined when I got out of grad school, and I came up with this new theory of intelligence. I called it personal intelligence, theory of personal intelligence, and why it's different than IQ. And realized when I encountered Maslow's writings, I was like, oh, well, all I'm talking about is self-actualization. I should have read Maslow before I wrote on gifted, when it was saved me from inventing new vocabularies.
And just to make sure we're all on the same page here, talk about what self-actualization actually is.
I think different cultures might have different definitions of it, and the term goes back way beyond before Maslow, of course. But the way Maslow thought of it is, what are the unique potentialities within you that that only you can realize, that give it its full creative potential. That really, and that's what creative potential is. It's your unique potentialities. There's lots of needs that we share with other people. We share the need for safety, and we need this. We share the need for belonging and connection and self-esteem. And we all want to be respected. We all want to be connected. We all want to feel safe and secure. But do we all have an amazing comedic sense of humor? Do we all have, like Jesse's amazing podcast host capabilities? You have to find and discover what is that thing within you that really, when fully expressed, can really make the biggest impact and contribution to the world.
And for somebody who's listening right now and they're thinking to themselves, I have no idea what this is in me. Like, I've done a lot of things and, maybe I've accomplished a lot of different things, but I don't feel like I've really honed in on what that true gift is. Where do they begin?
Some people do just suck across the board, and that's just the luck of the draw. No, I'm joking. Joking. Calm down, everyone. Calm down. Calm down. Calm down. It's my own sense of humor. Look, I think that um, yeah, I get this all the time. I get this from like college students, because I was a professor at Columbia, and college students, when I talk about purpose, it's such a high concept for them. They're trying to just get through their tests. They're trying to just like get a good grade on my exam, and then here we are talking about purpose. We're talking about some of these higher things, and I think that we don't have to put so much pressure on ourselves to discover that one unique thing, the one great meaning, the one great purpose to one's life. I think we get reminders of this all throughout our day. Uh, uh, Viktor Frankl, who was a humanistic psychologist, who was in the concentration camps when younger, he he said that purpose is it's more about a calling from outside yourself. It's not the thing you discover within yourself. And I think just like shifting that takes a lot of the pressure off you. It really puts the onus more on your own ability to be really aware of your surroundings and the needs of others, and helping to try to fulfill the needs and be of service. And I think when we kind of shift that, we start to see callings everywhere. We start to see callings, at the supermarket. You see an old lady, walking who can't seem to, pick up the banana, and you pick up the banana for her. I don't know. The first example entered my mind, but the point is, there's your calling in that moment. Does calling always have to be this one? It's like one thing. It's like a one shot deal. You have your calling, and then and if you missed your calling, then you missed it. No, I don't think it works. I don't think life works that way.
Well, in the book, you have this nifty breakdown of a way people can evaluate when it comes to work if they found that calling. You break it down between job, career, and calling. And reading through that was really interesting. And I think a lot of people, and you mentioned this in the book, reading through those 3 short paragraphs, you can kind of get an idea. Again, when you relate, you could use your example there in the grocery store or in a lot of different ways if you're operating in that realm of your calling. But if when it comes to work, that provided a really good framework to see if you were, you know, following your passion, following your calling.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm impressed you read my book. Thank you. Not everyone does. Yeah. And so I think, using these kind of guidelines, they're just rough and ready guidelines, but being able to notice the difference between what you're doing in your life, that does it, what does it feel like to you? What is it, what kind of characteristics? And another kind of similar guideline is the difference between harmonious passion and obsessive passion. So what extent is what your work, you may be passionate about it, but you might be obsessively passionate about it. It doesn't really make you feel good about yourself when you engage in it, but you feel a compulsive need to engage in it. You feel like you should do it. You feel like you can't ever take breaks or stop doing it. Um, and and that's not conducive to self-actualization, actually. Harmonious passion is where it's at, my friend.
Let's break down a little bit more of what that is. You kind of got into, that slope of heading into when it becomes a negative thing, but how do we know we're on the right track there?
Yeah, I mean, there's no. So harmonious passion. Let me just define harmonious passion a little bit. So harmonious passion is when what you love doing is a real core part of your identity, and in a way that it's not just I love doing it, but I am this. I don't just love basketball, but I'm a basketball player. There's a difference. It's a real core part of your identity, and it makes you feel good about yourself, and it's in line with who you want to be and with the rest of your aspects of yourself. We can have lots of different aspects of ourselves, and some are um, widely contradictory than others, and that can be okay. But our work, or the thing that brings us the most satisfaction in our life, should be something that I think is something that fits very harmoniously into the rest of the structure of the personality.
Do you feel if somebody is in a situation where they're working a job and they know it's just a means to an end and they're not really fulfilled by doing it, and they don't really see a way out of that. And it's like, this is going to be what I do for work, and then I'm going to have these other aspects of my life that are more fulfilling outside of work. Do you think somebody in that kind of situation can reach a deep level of fulfillment, or do they need to kind of figure out an exit strategy over the long term?
They can make it work. That's my answer. They can make it work. There's a whole field um, uh, with called like job crafting. Where job crafting is you can try to maybe work with your supervisor, your manager, to kind of change the role of your job a little bit. Still fulfill the same functions, still have the same outcomes, but the process changes a little bit where you can infuse a little bit more of your own personality, bring your own character strengths more to the table, and you can do a little bit more crafting of the job, tailored along more harmoniously passionate lens. Now, if you can't do that, then why not reframe your whole life in the sense, just change the narrative. That work, that's not your calling. Your calling is now your work. I used to call work is what I do to get paid. See, the thing is, there's no rough and ready rules in life like this. There's nothing like, it's like, that is your work. Moses says in the Ten Commandments, that is your work, and that is not your work, but that may be something you love. No, no. The thing you love, why don't you call that work? The thing that you've been calling work, why don't you just say that's the thing I must do to pay the bills? But, when I'm not doing that, then I do the thing I love. Then I do my calling. See, people create so many false dichotomies in their lives that are so unnecessary.
I love that. It's so simple, but it's such an easy flip in the brain that you can start to, you know, see a different way of thinking about things.
Totally, totally. But I would work on the job crafting aspect first to see if that's possible, because a lot of people don't even realize it's possible. And there's a whole literature on that. And I'd be happy to load people up on that. If people want to message me, I'm happy to send them papers and stuff because I'm really passionate about the job crafting literature. A lot of people just don't. They feel like they're stuck in their job. They because they're not bringing their whole self to the table, or even the best parts of themselves to the table. And often when they approach their managers and discuss this kind of possibility, the manager, it's win-win for everyone. The manager loves it. Okay, so we're now going to reframe your job as from a teacher, you're now going to be a customer service representative because that's what you're better at. Great. Okay, now you're the customer service representative for students. I don't know, whatever it is, but reframing the whole job description and idea, but you get the same results, and often you get better results.
I can see how a lot of people who are caught up in a quote unquote job, and then, coming home and getting caught up in family dynamics, making dinner, taking care of the kids, on and on, that maybe a lot of people haven't had an opportunity to really find out what their passion is or what they're really excited about in life. So if somebody's saying, okay, this all sounds good and it's something I want to pursue and figure out, what's going to really make me tick, but I don't even know where to start. Basically, my days right now are taken up by work, 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 and taking care of everybody else. I don't really have any hobbies that I'm super excited about. How do they begin to chip away at that and figure out what, where their calling is?
I mean, time management is one of the most important things. I mean, this is the essential aspect of your question is how can people learn time management skills? See a time management coach, maybe. um, uh, cut back on outsource things to other people. I mean, that's a whole literature in itself and what you can do. If you don't feel like you're having enough time in your life to do the things you really believe you're on this earth to do, then you have to take a really hard look at your life. You really do, because life is so short. Human existence is so brief. You can't. This is not something that you need to ask someone else permission for. You don't even need to ask the question that you just asked me. Do you know what I mean? Like the answer is in the question. The answer is, well, then, you might have to make some serious changes to your life to do so. You need to, but I really think you need to protect the calling time in like ferociously, like you're defending a fort. Like this is non-negotiable. I'm on this earth to do certain things, and or even we're all on this earth to discover those things. And if you don't have any time, like if you're saying you have no time in your life to discover your calling, discover the things in your life that will help you uniquely self-actualize and help you make a unique contribution to the world, and you don't like that situation, then you really might have to make some significant changes. But not everyone wants self-actualization. This is the thing. That's why I added that caveat. And if that bothers you, there's no shame whatsoever. Of course, in if 100% of your time in life is family life, there are a lot of stay-at-home dads, stay-at-home moms. There are a lot of and it brings them immense sense of joy and calling. Maybe you can even start to reframe your immediate life where you're saying, I don't have time for the calling. Start to see and develop and find more meaning in what you're currently doing in such a way that it starts to become a calling. There are all sorts of ways to address that issue that are very complicated and require coaching. I'm a big fan of coaching. I'm in that world, and require well, asking yourself lots of questions that only you uniquely can answer. I'm not a fan of stock answers to that kind of question, if that makes sense.
You quickly touched on there how quickly life goes by, and I'm a big proponent of looking at this on a regular basis and using that as motivation to, get out there and do what really matters. And you share a story towards the end of your book where you were going to go in for a benign surgery and you had sort of a wake up call about, your life and how quickly it's going by. So I'd love for you to talk about that because I think a lot of people, this could be an important first step for them to realizing, we don't have endless amounts of time and we need to really make the most of each and every moment.
No, we don't have it. We really don't have endless amounts of time. And I realized when I was doing um, uh, what was I doing? There was a certain procedure that the doctor's like, yeah, no, we just have to read the probabilities of making this and whatever. We just have to say that to everyone, and very, very good likelihood you'll make it through this, but there's some chance you might not. And I was like, there's a chance I might not. And then I thought to myself, well, wow, there's no chance of not making it out of life alive in general. Is that true? And I'm like, wait, is that true? Is that? I still don't fully buy that. By the way, there's still a part of me that's like, there's a chance. There's a chance. I'm taking lipo NMN supplements, which my friend, who's a Harvard geneticist, tells me will prolong life. And look, but here's the thing, it just really, it gave me an existential crisis. I read so many books about death. I read I've read the literature, the philosophy of death, which did not give me any comfort whatsoever. That was a boring ass literature. Let me tell you, if you want to read a boring ass literature, read the philosophy of death literature. But I read the literature on Irving Yalom's work. He's an existential psychotherapist. Really big fan of Irving Yalom. I recommend his book Staring into the Sun. That helped me a little bit. I read Maslow's writings about that. I think what really touched me was reading about Maslow's end of life and the amazing sense of transcendence that he had in his life, and what he called the plateau experience, which is being able to see the miraculous in the everyday. And I realized, I don't need to wait till I'm in the last couple years of my life. Knowingly, the last couple years. I could be right now in my last couple, right? But but we don't have to wait till the very, very end until we can start to get more in that transcendent state of being on a regular basis. That kind of formed the whole purpose of this book. The book is called Transcend. There you go. There's the action verb. Is that my English teacher would be proud of me? Is that what's called the action verb? Transcend. And don't wait. Don't wait to transcend, or else it might be too late.
And Scott, do you feel like since you got into, that reading and that research and really dug into your feelings personally on the subject of death, do you think you've been able to see the magnificent more in your day in, day out life? Or was it more just, while you were doing that research? Have you been able to bring that with you and use that in your day to day?
Oh, for sure. I think that the research and the book and everything has really tremendously helped me um, be more in wonder and awe at human existence. It's all really quite fascinating. There are all these regularities that you see over and over again. And the key is, can you view these regularities with wonder and awe and see something new in them every time you see them? It's very easy to get excited by a new shiny object, but it's much more difficult and challenging, yet rewarding, to be able to see the same thing over and over again and still continually see it fresh.
Well, let's get really granular on that and talk about how we could go about doing that in a practical sense, because I always find it's easy after, a conversation like this. I can go into my afternoon afterwards and be more present, be more tuned into what really matters in life. But then again, coming back to the busyness where people are working their job 9 to 5 and they get into taking care of their family, taking care of their basic needs, I think a lot of times that can get left by the wayside. So what I'm curious is going granular again, talking about how we can bring that into our day-to-day life on an ongoing basis.
Uh, Maslow called it, like, entering the B realm of human existence. Enter the realm of human existence where you can grow and you can uh, really uh, see the world on its own terms, not on in a deprivation state of mind. So it's very important in answering your question to distinguish between a deprivation mode of existence and a growth mode of existence, or the being realm of human existence versus the deficiency realm of human existence. When you're in surrounded by people and news and situations that constantly remind you of your deprivations, that puts you in a certain state of consciousness, and that consciousness is not most conducive to transcendence. I hate to say, but if you can do things that actively put you in the being realm, I'm reframing your question to put it within that framework. You need the answer to your question is to put yourself in the B realm more, and there are so many things you can do. I mean, even just getting out of nature, getting being around positive voices, positive joining clubs and things where there's people are focused on helping each other, being able to get into the flow state with your work, and being ruthless in your concentration, and removing distractions, uh, and allowing and doing things that really bring you kind of that harmonious passion are going to be more likely to get you into a um, we were talking about harmonious passion earlier, and that can really help get you into the flow state when you're doing things that are obsessively passionate about. You're much less likely, yeah, to be in the being realm. You're probably still being motivated by deficiency, even as you're doing your work. So removing as much of the barriers of deficiency focus as possible. We all have deficiencies, and there's no one that has no deficiencies, and you can harp on them all day. You can focus on them. You can complain about them. Uh, but that's not the state of being that's going to allow you to get outside yourself and see things on their own terms. See, that's the difference between the deficiency realm and the being realm. Is when you're in the deficiency realm, you only really care about things to the extent to which they can provide something for you, fulfill a hole in you. So if you're hungry, you only see the world to the extent to which people can feed you. If you're lonely, you only see people to the extent to which they'll like you and accept you, and then make you feel less lonely. If you lack respect and you feel like you suck at everything, you're desperate for people to validate you and to say, you're great. And well, this is where narcissism comes from, in a lot of ways, especially vulnerable narcissism, which is a topic I've studied quite a bit about, that not many people are as familiar with. But there's all that is not being able to get outside yourself and see the wonder and beauty the miraculous that's outside of you, and so all those things I just mentioned, the deficiency realm, are inhibitors of transcendence. They're inhibitors of self-transcendence. Being able to lower the volume, dial down the volume on your ego to be able to see a person for who they really are, as opposed to who you want them to be, can be a miraculous thing.
You talked about dialing down the volume of the ego. Let's get into that a little bit and talk about how do we begin to assess whether our ego is in check or not? And then if not, how do we begin to, bring it back?
How do we bring it back to what?
Bring it back. Like you mentioned, you used the analogy of turning the volume down. So how do we go about, corralling it or turning the volume down?
Yeah, that tripped me up is like turn it back, dial it back, to dial it down. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, gotcha. Well, Jesse, big part is listening. I mean, that seems pretty obvious, but active listening is different than passive listening. And active listening really requires you to see and hear a person on their own terms and what they're really getting at, and what their motivations underlining what they're saying really are. Common humanity, finding the common humanity, and not only taking the perspective of another person, but being able to constantly be on the lookout for connections between you and them, and generalizing that to all of humans, and pointing that out with the person can be really helpful. Mindfulness can certainly be helpful, and being in a kind of personal growth sort of attitude with it. So you're in a state of mind with a person where you're curious about how this can help, the situation can help you both grow, as opposed to demonstrating that you're smarter than the person, or demonstrating that you have the answers, or that you need to tell them what you think. You're just waiting for them to stop talking so that you can tell them what you think. That's exactly, by the way, Jesse, I don't know if you noticed, that's our political climate today. Have you noticed that?
It seems so, yes.
I mean, it's like a Republican. Then they stop, and the other person says, Democrat. And then they stop talking, and the other person goes, Trump. And the other person's like, no, but social justice. So it's just like, no one's listening to each other. No one is actively listening to each other. And they're so quick to talk from their ego, so quick.
You mentioned narcissism there, and vulnerable narcissism being an area that you've delved into and really have a great understanding of. Let's start off talking about narcissism as a whole, and then the different types.
The kind of core aspect of narcissism is a sense of entitlement, and a sense of, particularly its entitlement and a need for validation of your greatness. So there's kind of like a core aspect that, an admiration aspect to it, attention. Narcissists are extraordinarily in need of attention all the time, right? They love that. They love attention. But there are different faces of narcissism. So in the general population, some people tend to score much higher in what's called grandiose narcissism, where they tend to be more extroverted. They tend to be more aggressive outwardly. They constantly state and talk about their greatness. Whereas some score much higher in what's called vulnerable narcissism, which is a need. It's more fragile. It's kind of a need to have attention, but you're actually more introverted. So you're more prone to grandiose fantasies in your head, as opposed to the grandiose narcissist will tell you their fantasies, like, I'm the greatest, I'm going to be the greatest. Whereas vulnerable narcissists tend to surprise people. People will, from the outside, will think, oh, Joey's such a, sensitive, quiet, shy kid. And then they read Joey's journal and they're like, holy shit, Joey is a psychopath. Okay, so Which is different than vulnerable narcissism. But vulnerable narcissism, may just have like these fantasies about, I'm going to take over the world. I'm going to, I'm the greatest, and constant resentment and hostility that they're not being appreciated. So you see a lot more resentment and hostility for not being appreciated among vulnerable narcissism than grandiose narcissism. Grandiose narcissists almost just will just take it for granted that they're great, and they just act as if. So there's a difference. There's a difference. But at the clinical level, so not at the everyday individual difference level, but when in what tends to present itself in clinical settings, like therapy, is a rapid oscillation between the two. So those who are pathological narcissists tend to constantly go back and forth between feeling like you're the greatest and feeling like you're a piece of shit, feeling like you're the greatest, and then not being able to deal with the feeling of being a piece of shit, and the only way to correct that is feeling like the greatest. There's usually ever a middle ground with these folks. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. And for people that are dealing with this, whatever form of narcissism, is there hope for them? Like you mentioned therapy there. What kind of hope is there for these people? And do they even realize oftentimes that there is an issue?
Yes, yes. There's hope. There's hope. And there's particularly the vulnerable narcissists realize there's an issue, and it can be very prone to depression and anxiety. Those are the ones that tend to end up in the clinical psychology couch, are the ones that score high in vulnerable narcissism. The ones that are just pure grandiose narcissists usually only end up on the couch when a family member or someone forces them to go to like family counseling or something like that, like relationship counseling. And they usually resent it because they don't think they need to be there. So the question you're asking, I think, has a lot more relevance to the vulnerable narcissist. And there is hope. And a lot of that is a matter of being able to stabilize your self-esteem and doing the hard work to not avoid your emotions, what's called experiential avoidance, but to confront them and kind of confront the totality of your being, and shed the perfectionism. See, a lot of these folks, there's a really strong link between perfectionism and narcissism. There's this idea that you must come across or self-present yourself at all times as great, and vulnerable narcissists, walk around with intense shame all the time if they're not doing something great. Shame is a very strong correlate of vulnerable narcissism. So I think that we can, the same kind of exercises that apply to anyone who tends to live a life being shameful of everything and perfectionistic and having imposter syndrome, I think can apply equally to help people with vulnerable narcissism. I've written scientific papers about this, and that's a topic I'm very interested in.
You mentioned self-esteem there. I'm curious when it comes to the pathology of narcissism, whatever type you want to get into, is self-esteem an inflated, sense of self at the root of that ever?
Self-esteem is not a problem. Self-esteem, there's a difference between self-esteem and narcissism. There are different constructs entirely. So self-esteem just means that you think you're worthy and competent. You believe in your competence and your ability to be an agent in the world, and you feel like you're a worthy human being. And that's a wonderful thing. Having a high self-esteem is not a problem. In fact, there's much more problems with those who have low self-esteem than high self-esteem. Low self-esteem people are the ones that are likely to go school shooting sprees. Okay, it's not the high self-esteem person. But because there's really no such thing as a low self-esteem. It's really uncertain self-esteem. And the person scores very high in vulnerable narcissism tends to have a very uncertain self-esteem, very confused about who they are and what they're capable of. That they need that external validation. A person with high self-esteem just feels secure and confident in who they are. They have warm, competent relationships. I think high self-esteem is a great thing to have. I think there's a very, very big difference between that and narcissism. Even grandiose narcissists, who aren't vulnerable narcissists but are grandiose narcissists, their self-esteem, it's still very rapidly in flux. It's constantly externally dependent on others, and it is not just simply I am worthy. It is I am superior. It really is. I am superior, and that's different. I am the belief that you are superior is not a high self-esteem belief.
I see what you're saying there.
That's a narcissistic belief. Yeah.
And for somebody who's feeling like their self-esteem is, kind of in the dumps right now and they want to start picking that back up and building on that, where do they begin?
I think, bit by bit, the key is to create an authentic self-esteem, an authentic sense of pride for your life, and that really requires forming meaningful relationships with people, really making the effort to utilize these kinds of techniques I was talking about for quieting the ego, and doing things that helps you learn a skill set, or develop things that really help you have greater mastery and competence for something, so you can have authentic pride in what you're doing. There's a difference between authentic pride and hubristic pride. They're different things, and authentic pride is much more strongly correlated with self-actualization, well-being, life satisfaction, and positive social relationships with others.
Can you break down the difference between the two?
Well, authentic pride is what I was saying, where you essentially have earned, you've done stuff that is legitimately good. You've written a book that is a good book. Legitimately learned violin. But people who have a hubristic pride, they just have pride they take credit for things they didn't do. They're just, I don't know if you can think of any examples of anyone who, they just thump their chest and they're like, I'm the greatest, and they didn't even do anything. They didn't do anything. But they're like, and they'll just take everyone credit for everything else in their orbit. Be like, oh, that was my idea. I'm the greatest. That's hubristic pride. Can you think of anyone?
That just takes credit for something that they're not really involved in? There's probably a lot of that going on in the internet world. People,
Maybe, yeah.
copying other people's content that they worked hard on creating, or books and stuff like that. What about you?
Yep, I can think of quite a few examples.
Give me one.
In the political sphere, I can think of an example. I'm thinking of an example in my head right now in the political sphere.
I think we know where you're at.
Correct. I'm thinking about Biden. That is correct. Not joking.
Let's come back to Maslow. I think a lot of people know that name, but they're kind of thinking to themselves, where have I heard that? Where does that, connect for me in my previous education? So let's talk more about him and his hierarchy of needs.
So he had this original theory that you have to satisfy a certain level of need before you can get on to a next level. And this wasn't even his theory. This is how it's been presented. So a lot of people present it in a certain light, that life is like this video game where you reach security needs, and then some voice from above is like, congrats, you've unlocked connection needs, and then you kind of go up to the next level in this hierarchy, and then you never have to worry about the lower level. And some people seen it in a pyramid formation. Have you by any chance ever seen the hierarchy of needs before in the pyramid?
The pyramid?
Yeah.
I'm sure many times over the years, psychology courses in university and different memes online, stuff like that. Always a pyramid.
And then you have at the bottom you have toilet paper, for the COVID times, as the most essential need because they all ran out of toilet paper during the early stages of COVID. But yeah, this is very interesting because Maslow never drew a pyramid, so that's something that's quite interesting. And he never, and if you actually look in his writings and look deep into his ideas about motivation, he never made the claim that self-actualization required you to never return to the lower needs. That's just not the case. Life is always a 2-step forward, 1 step back dynamic, and we can think that we're making lots of progress in our life and we're growing, and then we can at any moment become hungry again. It's like every day we there's a moment we probably get hungry. It's not like we ate and then we never worry about eating again. And we have to, constantly renew our friendships. We can't take our friendships for granted. We can't just say, "Oh, I have my connection needs met, and I don't need to worry about that again." Or um, our self-esteem needs. There are things that we legitimately do to make ourselves feel good about ourselves, and I think that it's very important to think about it from Maslow's motivational perspective, not the way that it's been really misconstrued and misunderstood throughout the years.
In writing this book and going back and looking at Maslow and the history, have you been able to pinpoint where the pyramid came from and who was responsible for that?
Well, there are some researchers who really narrowed it down to a management consultant in the early '60s, I believe, and I've seen the renditions of it. Actually, very early renditions of it where it was like a step ladder with like the self-realized man at the top with a flagpole. Very organizational, sexist. 50s, like Mad Men you know kind of mentality. So, uh, even from its earliest days of its depiction, it kind of was co-opted for the purposes of making a point that Maslow never wanted to make. It's the interesting thing about self-actualization is that it's not the same thing as achievement. Self-actualization is not success. This idea of success, and you've made it, you've top of the mountain with a flagpole. Self-actualization is a constant unfolding process of who you are. And if you, I've never quite put it that way. I want to write that down. I like that. I like that. Self-actualization is a constant unfolding process of who you.
It's a way of being rather than having a goal and then reaching it.
That's exactly correct. And people, there's a whole framework of greatness and success, and you read Success magazine, and it's like there needs to be a self-actualization magazine because it would be different. They'd be different things. You have like the 10 characteristics of the successful person. You see it all in all the articles, and it's always like like the secrets of the rich and successful. But the secrets of the self-actualized person are suffering, setbacks, things no one wants to hear, trying and exploring things and seeing what works and what doesn't work, lots of trial and error, attempts at authenticity, acceptance, going through a process of fully accepting who you really are, as opposed to who you want to be, and being capable of knowing what you can change about yourself and what you can't change about yourself, and trying to seek out new relationships, and getting outside yourself and hear callings from outside. The characteristics of self-actualized people, it's just a different thing than what you tend to see over and over and over again in these articles in business magazines.
I like that. I think that's an important way of breaking it down too, where people, it's like living by certain values. It's your way of being rather than getting to an endpoint, which is interesting because of the way it's depicted in the pyramid, and people think it's like getting there and then you're enlightened or whatnot.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
So you talked about something there when you're describing these characteristics of somebody who's self-actualized, and you talked about having, I'm going to be paraphrasing here, but having love for oneself, accepting oneself for who they are. And I think this is such a foundational thing that a lot of people, you know, it's probably an ongoing thing for all of us at different times that we're working on in different, we kind of ebbs and flows. But talk about the importance of that being foundational, because I'm assuming you'd agree with me on that. And then how does somebody begin to do that work? Because it sounds like, if it is so foundational and so impactful on day-to-day well-being, it's worth getting in and making sure that we have that love for ourselves.
Yeah, and we're not talking narcissistic love. We're talking about healthy self-love. And healthy self-love is a process of being kind to yourself, of having self-compassion, when you're struggling, recognizing that you're part of the rest of humanity that is also struggling, um, not being cold with yourself. And another part of it is self-acceptance, accepting who you are, not who you want to be, like I said, and then accepting the totality of your being, not just the parts of yourself that you like about yourself. So self-love is not just loving the parts of yourself you love. That's a tautology, my friend. Self-love is loving all of you, and accepting all of you, and like you could even love someone you don't like, in the outside world. That you can universal love doesn't mean that you necessarily feel connection to another person. I think a lot of the same principles of universal love, this can be this spotlight can you can shine it outside yourself, you can shine it inside yourself. It's the same kind of essence, it's the same juice. This juice of love is something, just wherever gets the beam of attention gets the beam of attention. But people who tend to be very hateful people tend to hate themselves. Psychopaths don't have a lot of self-love. I've done research on it. I mean, I can show you correlation tables. People who love them, who have great self-acceptance for themselves, tend to be very accepting people of others.
And talk more about the importance of why this is so foundational.
Oh, it's foundational because it's so pervasive of everything you do in your life. It's so foundational of what you do, your way of being, the way you think of yourself emanates out into every interaction you have with others. It emanates out into your way of being in the world, and your way of being in the world with others impacts the way people treat you, and then how you think of yourself. So, I mean, there's a few things that are more important than self-love, than healthy self-love.
Is there specific exercises somebody can partake in after they listen to this, like using affirmations in the mirror or, meditating on certain ways of thinking about themselves? Practically, how can they go about, facilitating that love? I know it's not going to be a snap of the finger and an overnight thing, but where do they begin to start, you know, building that inertia?
Good, fair question. I think that there are there are many entry points into that. One is, well, go and type in Google Sharon Salzberg meditations. Her meditations are amazing. They're very much about uh, uh, just cultivating a greater sense of loving kindness for others. Um, there are free meditations online for Chris Neff's self-compassion meditations. That's another place to check it out. There are lots of great resources on this. Some of it requires doing the hard work of going through self-acceptance, and again, Tara Brach's radical acceptance would be helpful as well. I mean, there are lots of experts, lots of people who've devoted their entire lives to this topic, and I would seek out their wisdom.
And Scott, are you somebody who meditates on a regular basis?
Yeah, I mean, meditation is extraordinarily important for me because it helps me not identify so much with my thoughts, and um, be able to kind of concentrate and see them all in a very non-judgmental way. Yeah, I think that this links to the question you just asked me about self-love, because uh, it's the self-acceptance. You can have acceptance of your thoughts, right? Like, this is what I find meditation helps a lot with, is having a real deep acceptance of whatever is entering my mind. It's happened. It entered my mind. I can't help it. I didn't ask for it to enter my mind. I got no free will in that. But what can I do in the sense of how I respond to it? What can I do in the sense of um, what I can do to really uh, have more flexibility in between stimulus and response.
Let's talk more about thoughts. You kind of opened something up there in my mind when you're talking about meditation and letting the thoughts in. I think this is a big problem for a lot of people where, we all have these different thoughts that come into our minds and like you said, we don't have control over what that is. But for a lot of people, what I find is a lot of people tend to, try and block out the bad thoughts or avoid them. And I'd love for you to talk about a healthier way that we can respond when those thoughts come in and why that's so important.
I mean, I think that's what the practice of meditation is. That's the whole point of it, in a big way, is to watch it go around like it's a carousel, uh, and not do anything about it. It's like when you're in an airport and you see your luggage coming, and you're like, I'm not going to pick up the luggage right now. I know it'll come back. It'll come back again, and maybe it comes back, and you decide, no, I'm still not going to pick it up. That's a practice. It's like you go to the gym and you lift weights. You do all sorts of things to build your muscles, which I have too. By the way, I have too. But it is important to also build the brain muscles. The mindfulness muscles. And you can build those mindfulness muscles by keep practicing, not becoming attached to your thoughts, and just becoming a witness to them. I mean, it's called witness consciousness. That's what you're doing, is you're cultivating your witness consciousness.
Any other tools you can recommend other than this process of watching the thoughts go by that we can use? I like your analogy there of going to the gym. What's some other practices we can use on a regular basis to sharpen the mind?
Well, I'm not gonna share all my secrets with you, Jesse. You're trying to get it out of me, and I gotta keep that under my within my books that people gotta read. But I I think that there there's so many things that we can do in our daily life as we go through human existence, being with others, and there are so many opportunities to practice mindfulness and presence that don't require you to go up a mountain and sit there and meditate and get away from others. In fact, Maslow had this really interesting essay that he never published, but I read it, called "Can a Monk Ever Be Self-Actualizing?" And his answer was no. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting?
Yeah,
Um,
tell me more.
yeah, I mean, he to him, he really thought self-actualization required getting into it, getting in the muck of life. Like, yeah, you can kind of, he kind of sees, is in some ways, avoiding, life, going, to a monastery and meditating every day, and not dealing with the constant daily struggles of human existence and interactions with others. He thinks the self-actualization process requires really getting in there, getting into life. And I mean, in some ways, that's my suggestion for what you can do. I mean, I'm really resistant to hacks, and really resistant to domain general tools for how one can improve these things. That's not even what coaching someone is about. I'm trying to create a new form of coaching called self-actualization coaching, but a lot of that is about, it's about the questions you ask the person. It's about the exploration, the shared sort of facilitation exploration you have with another human, so they can understand their unique potentialities and the unique ways in which what they want to focus on in their day. And when it comes to that, these kind of general sort of tools just are not helpful.
No, I totally respect that. But you mentioned meditation being a tool, and I'm curious if there's any other, on a more general sense, we don't have to get into specific, hacks or whatnot, but things that you recommend when you're working with people. Maybe it's to get, a good sleep or to eat a certain way or to exercise. What gives people a strong mental foundation, in your opinion?
I'm not sure I know what a strong mental foundation means.
What I'm getting at is just to be mentally strong to cope with the challenges of day to day life. Basically, coming back to your gym analogy. So, how do we, and again, not in a hack way, but in a really foundational, broader perspective way, how do we go to the gym to keep our mind in good health? Again, coming to these principles that I'm assuming you'd agree with me on, like sleep and eating right and exercise. How do we maintain mental health in a strong way through these day-to-day practices?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and it's very relevant to your podcast, Ultimate Health, and you'll have plenty of guests on your show, I'm sure, that are experts um, in habits that can help you live a healthier life and mental health. Um, I tend to take a bit of a different perspective on it because I'm not that guy. I'm not like the Dr. Oz that's going to come on here right now and be like, and there's so many answers I could give you right now, and I'm just not. I don't want to be a guy that I'm not. Um, you have plenty of guests who will be that kind of person. It's self-actualization and my whole personal project, if I want to remain authentic, is to help empower people to discover what life works best for them. To me, that's what the self-actualization process is about. It's about um, being able to discover and explore what kind of life works for you, that you live it unabashedly, that you do it despite the hacks, despite what other people's advice, despite a doctor's advice. You say, you know what, that doesn't work for me. I tried it. It doesn't work for me. I would rather do something else. And that's what my project is about. That's all I can offer you today is what my project is. And when I work, I can tell you, when I work individually with clients, we really try to work on what are the things they can do in their life to keep moving more in the direction they want to grow in. And you start to build those habits. You want to be building the habits of moving in the direction of where you want to be moving in, and moving away from the direction of where you want to be moving. And then these things do over time become habits. And then you start to habitually become self-actualized in your own way and in your own style. That's what Maslow called that. That's what he thought that self-actualization was not turning a rose into a lily, but becoming a good rose, turning a good rose into a great rose. Not turning a rose into a lily. This is not answering it's probably not a satisfactory answer to your question.
No, I hear what you're saying there. I respect that. I guess just to kind of pivot a little bit, then what we can do is talk about, Scott, you on a personal level. What direction are you headed in? And what are some of the habits that you're using, and are part of your repertoire to achieve that forward momentum? And to caveat on that, I mean, you're somebody that's written all these books. You're a professor, you're a psychologist. You've had so much success. You're only in your 40s. So I'm just curious, what direction is this next chapter? Where are you headed?
Well, I like to think like the first half of my life was learning that it was doing the scientific foundational work of human potential, and where I'm definitely headed now is to create tools. Uh, it's funny because now what I'm about to say now may sound like it contradicts everything I just said, but before. But I want it for educators, to kind of have a scalable self-actualization coaching practice that could be trained on, the entire school districts can be trained on, so they're constantly on the know how to be on the lookout for unique potential in students, um, and make it something that is affordable and accessible to as many school districts as possible, because they can't get their hands. These journal articles are hidden under uh, lock and key, and you have to pay for them, and then you don't even understand them when you read them. And so, what is the latest science of human development and positive psychology, positive education, humanistic psychology? What neuroscience? What are these things? How can they inform us to create tools that can help be a guide for teachers to think of themselves as self-actualization coaches rather than teachers? So that would be a big thing for me. It would be kind of change the whole pivot around what an education would look like and what a teacher's role is in the school system. So I'm heading very much in that direction. And what keeps me focused on that is it's like a goal hierarchy. right? You have the highest level of a goal hierarchy is the most abstract level, and then every level under that becomes more and more concrete, down to very specific actions you take on a daily basis at the lowest level of the goal hierarchy. And I've created so many things in my life that are all feeding into the higher level. What you want to do is you want to create a goal hierarchy where as many things as possible harmoniously feed into the highest level of the goal hierarchy. And so I got like this and this and this and this. I have the Center for the Science of Human Potential, but then I have this class and that class, and then I have this collaboration, that collaboration. But when I look at it all, I'm trying to be very cognizant that it all feeds into the higher level of the goal hierarchy. That was a very clever way of you to get a concrete tool out of me uh, by asking me about myself, because that is something that can be applied to almost everyone, is the goal hierarchy approach. So there you go. You did get something out of me.
Well, let me dig a little bit deeper on this. You talked about taking this information in these scientific papers, coming up with tools that you can train these educators with. And we've covered so much stuff on the show to this point, but what is some of the science showing? What is some of the things that you would be teaching these educators to teach the others that you can bring to light for us right now?
It's a whole program. It's a whole, uh, having the sort of tools of like via character strengths. How can you have students share their top character strengths, or discover what are your signature strengths? I mean, is a really important one. A lot of it comes down to self-insight. A lot of it comes down to empowering people to have a voice and to tell you and discover and learn what kind of life they really want to live, and what really works best for them. What it's a whole it's a whole program. I mean, being a coach is really not a set of specific set of rules. It's opening up the space for another human to explore and discover who they want to be. And our current school system doesn't do that. Our current school system tells you who you should be, and that's someone who scores well on a standardized test or does well on a certain curriculum. And that's very antithetical to self-actualization, as we defined self-actualization earlier, as the unique creative potential within you that can make a contribution to the world.
And Scott, I know you're not somebody who has kids, at least not at this time,
How do you know
but
that?
given what you just said, well, that's what my research shows, at least. So, if you had somebody who was coming of age to the point, they're considering what they would want to do when it comes to further education, as somebody, you have a lot of education behind your belt, but you came from a different generation and it served you well. But how would you help guide a child, or even, as an uncle, how would you guide a nephew or niece trying to navigate this world of technology and information and things changing so quickly? What would you say to them to help them navigate that ever so changing path of where everything's going and where we're at?
I would say get off technology as much as possible. That's what I would say. It's really killing the human imagination. It's from a neurological perspective, there's part of the brain called the executive attention network, which is your ability to focus and concentrate on things outside of yourself, and the imagination brain network, or the default mode network, which is implicated when you're daydreaming and imagining and planning for your future self, and you have internal mental cognition. And it is a use it or lose it kind of thing. The more that our attention is constantly being captivated and being drawn into external sources, the less time we have for imagination to develop, and the less time we have to plan our own personal future and be able to even take the perspectives of others. I think that so much online use and attention stealing, I'm gonna call it attention stealing, is really robbing children and all of us of our own individual existence and humanity.
And Scott, how have you over the years navigated the waters of social media and all this information coming at us, and been able to, pull away to write these books and do all these different things? Because obviously it's a challenge for all of us, and I'm sure it's been for you too.
I very rarely pay attention to anything going on around me. I mean, that sounds like a funny thing to say, but it's not really wrong. I'm not wrong with what I'm saying. Like, if you like shadowed me for a day, I mean, I go on Instagram, I'll post the thing that I'm passionate about, and then I'm out. I'm out. I'm out. Like I'll go on Twitter and I'll post a thing, and then I'll get back to work. I'm not terribly interested in staying around for people to steal my attention. I that's not an exciting thing for me. I don't get excited to think like, oh, I can't wait to go on Twitter so people can steal my attention. That's what people are essentially doing when they go on Twitter looking around. Oh, let me look at this person's profile. They're basically saying, oh, how can I waste my day? I'm just not interested in that. I mean, life is so freaking short. There's so many things I want to accomplish, and I really want to make a big dent in the education system. It's not going to happen if I focus so much attention on all these other outlets of things that want to steal my attention. So I use it's how to use these social media platforms. I use these social media platforms to help amplify my message, and that's about it. And then I have friends in real life, which doesn't require social media. I love talking. I love having a hard day at work and then call my parents at the end of the day and catching up with them and see how they're doing. To me, that's more meaningful than going on Twitter see how's everyone doing. With strangers. You know what I mean?
No, I hear you. Let's come back to Maslow, and we talked about his hierarchy of needs, the so-called pyramid, which isn't actually a pyramid. And what you've done with Transcend is you've taken Maslow's work and you've updated it, and you've essentially turned it into a sailboat. So talk about that evolution, and how this is more fitting for our current time.
I've been waiting for you to mention the sailboat. I'm joking, but yeah, the sailboat is. I thought you'd never ask. I think that the pyramid is very clunky and it's static. But a sailboat is much more dynamic and more like a whole. It's much better metaphor for life, because we're not just the sum of our parts. We're more than the sum of our parts. A sailboat requires the boat itself to not have too many holes in it, or else the water will get in and it'll sink. But just having your basic needs met and just having the basic foundation secure doesn't allow you to grow. In order to grow, you eventually need to open up the sail and move in your most valued direction. In what port you're sailing to, but at any point in time, the waves can come crashing down on us. The winds. There's so many things that we can't account for in our journey. You have to be in motion if you want to grow. You can't just hide under your covers your whole life, or just have your basic needs met and say, I'm done. Life really requires stretching ourselves outside of our comfort zone and exploring, going it through a spirit of exploration as opposed to being driven by our fears. So that's why I think a sailboat is a better metaphor for our travails. Travails, is that a word? Our travels and journey for self-actualization.
So at the top of your sailboat diagram, you have transcendence at the top versus Maslow having self-actualization. How are those different in the same?
I would disagree with you that Maslow had self-actualization at the top. He revised it about a year before he died, and no one knows that except for me, and I'm telling you that now. I'm telling you the difference. And a group of people that attended a lecture he was at Unitarian Church in San Francisco. I think you actually listened to his lecture online. He said, at the highest level, once you have all your needs met, once you've feel self-actualized, a higher level seems to emerge, a higher motivation, which we can call transcendence, where your cause is no longer in your own skin. It's equally in your own skin and in the outside world. There's a great synergy between self and world. And so he proposed a higher motivation above self-actualization. So in a lot of ways, by me putting self-actualization there above the sailboat as an emergence of a whole unit, harmonious unit that's operating in a very self-actualizing fashion, it's very much in the spirit of what Maslow was trying to get at before he died. So I just wanted to correct the record on that. But a lot of people
I
don't know
guess I'm
that.
going.
Yeah.
No, I didn't know. I was going by all those memes
I
that
know.
float around on Facebook.
I mean, there are memes about me. Don't believe those memes either.
So somebody's got listening right now and they're interested in becoming their whole selves, all that they're capable of being. And they're motivated. They're inspired by our conversation. They're like, I'm ready to do this. What can they do today to get that inertia going and set things off on the right foot?
Well, I hope that this chat inspired you. First of all, I hope people listening to your podcast listen to this conversation and are like, "Wow, you know what? I'm going to do. I'm going to realize the full depths of my own unique being. Screw what Joey over there keeps saying I should be. I don't want to be that. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to grow. I'm going to wake up tomorrow and choose growth. And choosing growth is a process. Like I said, Maslow has this great quote, you could move forward towards growth, move back towards safety. You have to choose the growth option again and again and overcome the impulse for safety again and again. It's a continual process. That was a rough encapsulation of his quote. But that the basic idea holds, we have to really make the conscious decision to choose growth um, and get real clear with ourselves about what port we're sailing to, and setting those goals and having as clear a vision as possible of your future self is a really, really strong part of that process.
Early in the conversation, Scott, I believe you said that self-actualization isn't something for everybody to attain. And I'm curious what you meant by that.
Was I saying that when I was joking though?
Maybe you were joking, but I feel like that was something you dropped earlier, and I'm just curious if you could
What I
elaborate.
said earlier is that not everyone's motivated for self-actualization. I think that's what I said. I don't think I quite said.
Well, then I'm glad we're clarifying. That's good. So not everybody's motivated, but it's there for the taking for everybody, and it's
Yes,
a good goal to strive for.
that is correct. If it works for you, again, I don't know what I wouldn't say in general it's a good goal to strive for, because for some people that might not be what works for them. But I think that self-actualization is something that is attainable. And it's only attainable by you. That's the exciting thing. That's the exciting thing is that you can spend your whole life constantly trying to actualize someone else's self. Like you're like, I want to be like Michael Jordan, and you copy all his moves, and you do everything you can to try to be like Michael Jordan. What a waste of your own self-actualization that is. You know, it's ridiculous to me when someone seems so committed to self-actualizing someone else's self when you've been given a unique opportunity by God, or if you're not religious, by human evolution, to what an amazing gift you've been given to self-actualize your own self in a way no one else ever in the history of the world before you, and never again in the history of the world after you will ever get the opportunity to do, or even while you're alive, will get the opportunity to do. I think that in itself is miraculous and really quite awe-inspiring when you think about it.
Well, you bring up an interesting point there. How many of us, have had all these different beliefs from different people that we look up to or our parents, and they form these layers around us, and we've kind of lose track of who we really are and what we really want in life. So I could see how that would be a necessary first step to come back to who you truly are. And again, coming back to what we talked about earlier, loving yourself, accepting yourself just as you are right now. You don't have to do anything. You just need to yeah, choose to do that.
That's right. Choose growth. Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. And you can. You can choose to do it. I believe in you.
All right, Scott, let's leave it at that. The book is Transcend. Other than listeners and viewers getting a copy of the book, how can they connect with you after the show?
Um, well, you go to scottbarrykaufman.com. I kind of have everything there. Also, I do my own podcast. It's called the Psychology Podcast, and you can listen to that wherever you listen to podcasts. Yeah, I really truly hope today was inspiring for you, and can be a catalyst for change in your life.
Any final thoughts you want to leave before we part ways?
No, this was a very comprehensive interview, my friend. And I am grateful for you asking me to be on your excellent show.
Thank you, Scott. Really appreciated it. Enjoyed the conversation. Learned a lot from your book, and enjoyed picking your brain and getting into the nuances a little bit more. So, thank you for your time, and let's keep in touch. And wishing you all the best.
Sounds good. I wish you the best too, Jesse. I'd like to stay in
Thank you,
touch.
Scott. Take care.